Alright, martial characters are finally getting an upgrade in DC20. I'm the Nerd Doctor, here to diagnose what's wrong with your RPG game and here to help you fix it. Let's talk about the much needed upgrades in martial characters. I did mention this very briefly in my last video talking about conditions, when I talk about how, one of the biggest things I try to do early on when I was dealing with D&D and even when I was switching to ICRPG is I really wanted to make martial characters feel much stronger, because when it comes down to it, they just don't feel that way in D&D to me. In D&D, it's attack, repeat. Spellcasters, they scale exponentially. Martials, they just feel very flat. Spellcasters can hit with pretty heavy damage. They can apply conditions. They have utility outside of combat and can potentially alter all of reality when it comes to spellcasters. Everyone feels forced to kind of multi-class or pick a half-caster subclass to stay relevant in D&D, and I just really never liked that. They have utility, they have flavor, they have power, and it's all skewed towards magic, which I know it's fantasy. We all want magic, but some of my favorite stories honestly have been characters without magic. Black Clover is a perfect example. Rock Lee, Guy Sensei from Naruto. They kind of surpass their limits and really go beyond when it comes to what combat characters can do. So I really it's like, what's the point of having a martial class if it can't be? Like, I just like the balance that DC20 really works very, very hard to bring, is they really want to make sure that no matter what, that they all feel relatively level and even when it comes to their overall capabilities. So that's really the design philosophy in DC20, is to create balance and really level up martial characters, and that's what this video is all about. So in DC20, martials are purely martial, spellcasters are purely spellcasters, and hybrids are hybrids. There's one class, and when you have those subclasses, they expand on the actual things that you get in that class, and not like veer off into magic. Like, perfect example is the Arcane Trickster in the Rogue. It's very, very common pick when it comes to rogues, is the Arcane Trickster, and so that would be considered a hybrid or a path into spellcasting. Now, in DC20, if you do want to have something hybrid without choosing a hybrid class, is you can, with talents and with path points, is you can invest those in ways that get you spellcasting. But what DC20 does is they try to make a very strict martial class. You can certainly do those other things if you want to, and there's certainly some benefit to doing so. They just want you to be able to choose that straight martial path and feel like you are on balance with the rest of the party and still bringing something to the team beyond just being hit point sponges and powerful hitters. In DC20, power isn't a spell slot, it's a choice. Just to touch upon maneuvers real quick again. Maneuvers are one of the things that make martial characters so great. All martial characters get maneuvers, not just the Battlemaster subclass. They can use those to apply conditions like trip, parry, daze, all the things that I mentioned in my previous video about conditions. They do have that multi-check penalty, so if you want to attack 4 times, you'll have disadvantage times 4 on that, or disadvantage times 3 on that last attack if you really want to attack that many times, which that was one of the dumbest things I hated about D&D, is that one of your highest level achievements as a fighter was to attack 5 times, which is just like, how many times you want to watch someone roll before it gets to your turn. But in DC20, because of the way that the tactics are, and I touched upon this, I think I'm going to have to do a video about the importance of tactics, the benefit of it, and not to be so shy about it, because it can be a little scary to the new player. But tactics give this game a lot of depth. And the way that a fighter plays is they may put an action point down to attack. They might put an action point to give them advantage. They might put an action point into a power hit. They might give an action point into adding a maneuver to that attack. Or they can use a stamina point instead, and then use that action point to move. So it's you do a lot of different things with fighters than in combat than you could before, which again, it gives them a lot of depth. It makes them a little bit closer to spellcasters in terms of you might have to actually look through your abilities to figure out what you can do, versus, again, one of the first things I said in my first video was just having a script that you're reading from rather than something a little customizable and creative to play with. What creative ways can I use these action points in order to best help my team, to best set myself up for my attack, whatever. But the other things that martial characters get is they get the passive weapon abilities, and I know I'm going to make a video specifically on passive weapon abilities, but each individual weapon in DC20 has a passive weapon style, is what it's actually called in DC20. Just for example, the sword will deal +1 damage against exposed creatures. I think the axe deals +1 damage to bleeding creatures. So in that sense, what you're dealing with and what you're getting out of this is, again, that tactic scenario. First I'm going to apply the condition, and then I'm going to deal that extra damage with the hit. So that's where it brings that depth to characters. Spellcasters do not get passive weapon styles. They will be getting, if the buzz is true right now, but they will be getting a spellcast focus that does something similar to passive weapon styles, increasing ranges of spells, targets of spells, and stuff like that, which is really cool and really great because, again, and I'll probably go into this when I talk about spellcasters, but when that ability comes out, because it gives meaning to spell focuses, it gives meaning to weapons too. And again, I'm going to go more in depth in it, but it's just like, swords were just these stamps that not swords, weapons were just these stamps that you would put on a character. It didn't really matter what you held, because it was going to be either a D6 or a D8, very rarely a D10. But that's the only difference the weapons really had, is a different style die. And that's not really that fun. Whereas the passive weapon style actually makes it feel like, if you have some different weapon styles and you want to be one of those people who carry a lot of arms, and to have your pick of the litter when you're going into the battle, then you absolutely can. But it only makes martial characters get access to these cool tools. It makes gear and roleplay meaningful again. It's not just what you swing, but how you swing it and in what situation, because they have to have the condition for you to get that benefit. Stamina is also what makes martial characters a resource. I just briefly talked about it. But stamina points give martial characters a resource pool for their maneuvers and techniques. Then they don't need the stamina points in order to use their maneuvers, but they can use the stamina points in place of their action points for their maneuvers, giving them a little extra ability on their turn. Magic has mana, martials have muscle, and DC20 makes both matter. So utility outside of combat, this is where the prime change comes into play. So in DD, martial characters are often dead weight outside of combat, except for the rogue, who can, pick locks and set traps and check for traps, rather disarm the traps, which is their number one purpose when dungeon delving. But other than that, you tend to put a lot of your character ability points into things like strength and agility versus wisdom, charisma, and intelligence. But in DC20, you have your prime modifier, which is your highest modifier. So even if your highest ability in DC20 is strength or agility, you can still use that modifier when on certain skills and certain abilities to attack. So you could instead you could be an intelligent barbarian, which everyone uses this example so much. And instead you can have your prime modifier be your barbarian in intelligence, but you still hit just as hard as if you had put it into strength. Now the benefits of putting the strength might be for grapple attacks and athletic checks, or not. It just depends the build, but that prime modifier allows you to kind of expand a little bit. And if you put that in intelligence, now you're an intelligence barbarian, and you can have some utility if you put that information in terms of knowledge, nature, religion, whatever those little access skills are to the role play aspect of the game, versus just being a kind of a tough as nails type person. But there's no forced multi-classing. Like you can't. There's no in subclasses. You can do that if you want. You have the talents. You have the path points. You have the options if you want it, and it's very, very easy to do. But it is not a must in DC20 that you do mix and match. And I think that's you're going to see a lot more pure classes in DC20 than you did in D&D. Whereas I think multi-classing has become a bit of a trend. So DC20 martials are deep, tactical, and fun. And if you've ever felt like your martial class was just a stat block with a sword, it's time to upgrade. This is DC20. I'm the Nerd Doctor. This has been your daily dose from the Nerd Doctor. Stay clever. play smarter. I think that's the tagline I am leading on. So again, comment if you like it. Otherwise, give me ideas for a new one, because I don't know how to end these. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe.